to which they hate sin. They approach that by the rigors of the law. They don't understand grace. There's a whole bunch of things that we differ, but let's recognize that part of what drives them is their approach against sin. And that shocked some of these young men. In some of these cities, particularly Jeddah, where he was from, is a seedbed of intellectuals in Islam. The combination of the doubts of the intellectuals and the impressionable youth caused many of them to conclude that the only absolute and unconditional answer for them was to return to the fold of Islam in order to protect the Muslim world from the inherent dangers and sins of the West. They saw the West, and they didn't like what they saw that the affluence and freedom brought there with it. The sin, the liquor, the drugs, the rest of it. That may sound strange to us, but that was enough to get them to start looking more seriously at their background from Islam. Well, let's shift a little bit and take a look at Afghanistan, where all the world is watching right now. Afghanistan is a landlocked country. Pakistan carries the south and eastern border of it primarily, wedged between Afghanistan and India. China, of course, being to the east. Along the northern border, we have some of the former Russian, or I should say Soviet republics of Central Asia, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Turkmenistan. And then, of course, to the west we have Iran. So that's this interesting place called Afghanistan, and we're going to be talking a lot about Pakistan's involvement with Afghanistan as we go here. The big event will start at April 1978, when a group of Afghans seized power from the leftist regime of Mohammad Najibullah. He had a leftist regime. He was in many respects a puppet of the Soviet Union, but the secular and nationalistic but anti-communist Afghans successfully had a coup where they unseated him and took over. April 1978. Okay, that's an uprising that you and I would read in the paper and hardly take notice. But in December of 1979, Moscow intervened. They sent in troops. And again you say, well, gee, that's no surprise. They're protecting what they regarded as a province. But we don't realize how that shocked the Islamic world. And this is pointed to as the turning point in Osama bin Laden's life. And the point I'm really going to make is many others like him. They were so shocked by that, they got involved. What the United States decided to do, because we were anti-Soviet, we saw this as an opportunity also. So we funneled major assistance to 3 Islamic fundamentalist organizations in the hopes of defeating Moscow's intervention. But also in Pakistan, General Muhammad Zia-ul-Haq, he was the military dictator of Pakistan. He just previously overthrown the prime minister back a couple of years earlier. He exploited the popularity of this appeal to help the Afghan rebels. Here's the big evil Soviets coming down. We're going to get behind these Afghans, and he took advantage of that to help. In Pakistan, there are lots of the exiled Afghan leaders that were involved in this conflict. Saudi Arabia, which was also anti-communist. It's Islamic. Don't confuse me. The polarization was communist versus anti-communist. And so Saudi Arabia also provided substantial support. So we have, in effect, a 3-nation support of the Afghan Muslims fighting the Russian troops coming in. The Mujahideen, as they're called, the warriors here, were financed, trained, and armed, and they were recruited from the 3 million Afghan refugees in Pakistan. In Pakistan, they had the Afghan refugees. They recruited some of these guys, financed them, set up training camps. They also recruited about 20,000 Islamic militants from all over the world. There were other Muslims that wanted to get in the action. The Afghan issue became a popular cause. We have Islamic militants from China, Southeast Asia, and so forth, that are all getting mixed into the Mujahideen. All of this was largely coordinated and supervised by the CIA and also the ISI, which is the Pakistan equivalent of the CIA. The support that was thrown at this issue has been estimated by experts to approximate $40 billion. Over half of that was split between Saudi Arabia and the United States. A lot of the others came from donations from all over the world. So in approximate terms, there's probably about 10 billion from the U.S. and about 10 billion from Saudi, 8 or 10 billion from each of Saudi Arabia and the U.S. and a lot of other support that came in. Now, in this morass of training and causes and let's help these Afghan rebels fight the evil Soviet Union, there was a leader, a promising young engineering graduate from an affluent family of construction contractors in Jeddah by the name of Osama bin Laden. This is where he's cutting his teeth, and he's building his relationships with all these people. What we didn't realize at the time, it's easy to look back and see these things now, is a greater storm was being seeded by all this. Anyway, by February 15th of 1989, about 115,000 Soviet soldiers finally gave up. They finally retreated from Afghanistan. We've been supplying them with all kinds of weapons, including Stinger missiles. Those Stinger missiles brought down the Soviet choppers. They finally scratched. It was also about the time the Soviet Union had its own problems starting to come unravel too, by the way. But in any case, the fact that the Soviets retreated was a win, a profound win for the Islamic rebels. Washington celebrated, of course. Boy, look what we did. Brzezinski, who was really the architect of all this under Carter, he saw the helping of the Afghan rebels as a way to try to unwind the Soviet Union. That was his mentality. He had no grasp that he would be starting something far more serious even than the communist threat from Russia. One of the questions that has to be asked is, did the founders of the U.S. policy in Afghanistan during the Carter administration, that was from 77 to 81, realize that their zeal in defeating the USSR laid the foundation for a phenomenon that would spread through the entire Islamic world and endanger the U.S. homeland? That's really what we'll discover happened here. Did anyone ever notice the glaring contradiction in the U.S. policy? We're bolstering the Islamic zealots in Afghanistan and opposing the Islamic zealots in neighboring Iran. Can you try to picture them trying to figure out what's our agenda? There's no consistency. There's no way to rationalize that. Well, that leads into what I call the incubation period. Because following this